Hello, this is Dr. B, and today we are looking at Activity 13, Lesson 5.1, Part 2, Population Genetics. This is deer, mouse, fur color from the field to the beach, touch device addition from Connected Biology. Today we get to explore relative frequencies of alleles and how they change. In part 1, we looked at allele frequencies. We counted allele frequencies in populations, noting that there are 2 alleles for every mouse. So it's a little bit different than counting the different colors of actual individual mice. Now we're going to return to the population level of the multi-level simulation, this whole thing that we've been working on. It's pretty cool, where you have access to additional controls and information. Let's briefly explore these controls and graphs. Control inheritance of the MC1R gene. With inheritance turned off, every mouse gets a random fur color at birth, which is very unlike what goes on in the real world. It's pretty crazy if you turn inheritance off. Control whether a mutation can occur in the MC1R gene. With a mutation turned on, a mutation can occur in the sperm or egg, changing an RL gene, a light gene, to an RD allele or vice versa. Remember, RL is the light gene. It's the non-functional receptor that doesn't bond to the signal protein, doesn't break it open, and doesn't send signals to the rest of the cell to make dark melanin, which is eumelanin. RD is our dark, which does bond, is a receptor protein that does bond to that blue signal protein that we looked at before, breaks it open, sends a signal to the rest of the cell to make dark pigment and makes dark fur. Graph the genotypes and relative frequencies of the MC1R alleles. This time the graph over here is going to show us a graph of alleles, not of mice. So explore the controls and graphs in the simulation. After you have a feel for them, reset the simulation and try this. Well, let's just mess around with the simulation for a moment and kind of explore these controls. I'm going to add hawks, and we're just going to run it like we normally would. After a while, we're going to see that the hawks probably pick off the dark mice. I'm going to turn on the pie charts here. We're going to see that the numbers of dark mice probably decline over time. Now that's with inheritance turned on. We can see that the number of dark mice has declined dramatically after about 30 months, as it did in previous trials. If we turn inheritance, if inheritance isn't turned on, the mice that survive don't pass on their alleles, they just pass on random alleles. And so if we set up the same experiment, except we turn inheritance off, we run it at the beach with mice, and we watch. Last time it took about 30 months to get more light mice and almost lose all of the dark mice. Here, that's just not happening. We're almost at about 30 months here, and we're still... It's taking a little bit longer time, but we're not losing our dark mice than we did last time. Inheritance is a really important part of natural selection. If inheritance isn't at play, it takes a lot longer for natural selection to happen, if it happens at all. You can experiment with turning inheritance back on. I would reset. Turn inheritance back on, turn mutation on, add hawks, of course, and run it out, and see what happens when mutations are are turned on, so that our the light allele can turn dark, or the dark allele can turn light, and it's not just the hawks that are making genes flow within the population. That there are other factors that are at play. So in your small group, or by yourself in this case, discuss and decide on a question to ask about how these new factors that you can control might influence the relative frequency of alleles, genotypes, and phenotypes in the population over time. Write the question here and in your field notebook. Because you'll be investigating the question by collecting data and summarizing your results to share with the class, you'll not be able to test all possible factors. Choose a few factors that your group is most interested in exploring. So one of the things I was interested in exploring, if inheritance is turned on, does turning on mutations affect the frequencies of alleles over time with predation, i.e. hawks? If I add hawks, I'm in the beach environment, I add hawks, and I turn inheritance on. If I run that out, to when all of the dark mice disappear, how long does that take with just inheritance turned on, with inheritance and mutations turned on? Before collecting any data, predict the phenotype, genotype, and relative frequencies of alleles you will change as you adjust the different factors your group selected. So if we turn on mutations, this is my prediction and my hypothesis here. I'm writing an if-then statement. If we turn on mutations, then we'll see the frequency of light mice change faster because the dark mice do not have to inherit the light trait. They can just mutate. Of course, the light mice can mutate to dark mice as well. So I don't know exactly what's going to happen here, but we'll see. So I'm going to run two experiments here. I'm going to add hawks, and I'm going to run the experiment. I'm going to open up my, until I have 100% light alleles. I have inheritance turned on and mutations turned off. And I'm going to watch up here in this graph here until the light individuals go to 100%. So as soon as I get to 100% light mice, which is 100% light alleles, I'm going to hit the pause button here and record my number in a table that I've developed on my field notebook. So we're close. We're at 94% light alleles. We've got mutation. We're not mutating. All those mice have to inherit their alleles. And there we go. We're at 100%, and it took 90 months. So if I look at my, this is on the field notebook we were working on yesterday. We put our small group research question. I copied it from the multi-level simulation, the Concord page. If inheritance turns on, does turning on mutations affect the frequency of alleles over time with predation? Well, really, we should adjust that question. Does it affect the frequency of alleles? Does it affect the amount of time to change the frequency of alleles? We're going to run the beach environment. So the procedure is going to run the beach environment with hawks with inheritance and not mutations until we reach 100% light mice and record the number of months it took to get 100% light allele frequency. So that's what we just did. We know it's 90 months. We can see right here, that's 90. We're going to reset and do exactly the same thing, except we're going to check mutations. We're going to have hawks on. We're going to be in the beach. And we're going to wait till we reach light alleles, 100% light alleles, or 100% light mice in this case. We're going to do 3 trials. We're going to average the 3 trials for no mutations and mutations on. So here's a table I developed. You're going to have to develop your own table for your own experiment. This is my experiment. So right now I have no mutations, and it took 90 months to get to 100% light alleles. So right now I'm going to go back. I'm going to reset everything. I'm going to keep my my pie charts open. I'm going to still be on the beach. I'm going to add hawks. And I'm going to turn mutations on this time. This time it's going to be a little bit different. We're just going to have mutations on. Now the light mice can randomly become dark mice, and the dark mice can randomly become light mice without having to inherit that allele from their parents. And again, we're going to watch until we have 100% light mice. We're going to see if it takes longer or shorter or doesn't really matter. So last time it took 90 months to get 100% light mice, and so far we're on 50, but we're only at 87. Here we go, 94, 96. There we go. So this time it took 70 months. With mutations on, it took 70 months this time. Now we've only done one trial. That's not a really very good experiment. So it took 70 months with mutations on. You can finish the other 2 trials if you want to do this experiment. If you want to do your own data, that's great. Make sure when you're done, when I'm done, I would average the 3 no mutations trials. So this would be a number here. We'll just put XX for now. This would be a number here, and I would add 90 plus this number and divide by 3 to get the average of no mutations. And then I would do exactly the same for average with mutations. I would just add all the green numbers and divide by 3. So I'll put this in orange to help you remember that those are all the orange numbers. And obviously XX isn't a number. You have to do the experiment and figure out what that number is. You have to do 2 more trials of my experiment or whatever other experiment you choose. So summarize your results and conclusions so you can put it in the next table that we're going to do. As we go to the next page here, fill out lesson 5.1, table 3 in your field notebook. Well, let's actually call that table 4 because we made table 3 to answer our experiment. So let's go over to our field notebook and answer some questions. So here we are at the last table for lesson 5.1. I relabeled it table 4 since I labeled my experiment table, table 3. We're below that experiment table. You're going to have to make this on your own. It's not in your field notebook. You can make a table that represents whatever experiment you're doing, or you can replicate mine. Replicate just means copy. What did we do? We did an experiment to see if mutations made a difference. What did we observe, or what patterns did we notice? Well, I didn't finish the experiment. You're going to have to finish the experiment and see what happened. What have we figured out? Well, we figured out in class that hawks don't matter if you don't turn on inheritance. Inheritance is really important in natural selection. If you kill off all the dark mice on the beach with the hawks, or you kill off most of them, the light mice have to pass down those light alleles for the population to change, for the allele frequency to change. If there's no inheritance and the alleles are just random, you don't get the allele frequency to change. So what do we know? We know inheritance is important. We have to have that on to see if mutation is an important factor in this sim. And you're going to have to finish writing this. Mutations are or are not important in changing allele frequency. Now that's not the answer. You have to figure out whether mutations are important or are not important by finishing the experiment here in lesson 5.1. So that's all for lesson 5.1. I'll see you again in lesson 5.2. Finish up your experiment, record your data in the table, make sure you average your number of mutations, average your number of months to get to 100% light alleles, compare them, and then make some conclusions and finish this table. So you're going to have to finish this part, and you're going to have to finish this part and explain whether mutations are important or not. Thank you so much. I'll see you in lesson 5.2.